I received a chilling warning that read, "Run to the emergency exit now, do not look back." Those terrifying words were hastily scribbled on a folded napkin secretly slipped into my hand during a suffocating dinner. My name is Savannah. I am 31 years old, sitting inside a private VIP room at a luxury winery to endure my half-brother's birthday party. My father raised his glass to deliver a hollow speech about how our family needed to bond together after our recent tragedies. I remained perfectly silent to watch their performative affection, refusing to participate in this ridiculous charade. Then I caught a sharp but barely visible nod coming directly from my stepmother across the table. Right on cue, a server approached our table to swiftly remove my current drink before placing a fresh glass of deep red wine directly in front of me. As he set the crystal glass down on the table, his fingers brushed against mine to slide a small piece of paper into my palm. Dropping my hands to my lap, I unfolded the paper carefully to read the terrifying warning that made my blood run cold. Realizing my life was in immediate danger, I pulled my phone from my purse, pretending to have a severe work emergency. I loudly excused myself from the table before walking straight past them toward the heavy steel exit door at the end of the corridor. Welcome to Revenge Mode, where we bring you the most intense family dramas, alongside stories of ultimate justice. Please remember to hit that subscribe button, then turn on the notification bell so you never miss our thrilling updates. Now join me to find out exactly what terrifying truth was waiting on the other side of that door. Stepping through the heavy steel exit door, the freezing wind from the valley hit my face directly. I wrapped my coat tighter around my shoulders while walking briskly across the expansive gravel parking lot toward my parked vehicle. The crushing sound of rocks shifting under my heels echoed loudly in the quiet night, amplifying the tension running through my veins. Rapid footsteps approached quickly from behind, prompting me to spin around abruptly with my hand gripping the keys inside my purse like a weapon. The server from the dining room jogged into the dim illumination provided by a solitary street lamp overhead. He aggressively ripped the black uniform apron from his waist, tossing the fabric into a nearby waste receptacle before raising both hands to demonstrate he carried no weapons. He introduced himself formally as Pierce, clarifying immediately that he operated as a licensed private investigator rather than a winery employee. He reached into his inner jacket pocket slowly to extract a leather wallet, flipping it open to display a legitimate credentials badge shining under the yellow light. Pierce refused to waste precious seconds on pleasantries or apologies for startling me in the isolated parking area. He stepped closer to my position, keeping his voice lowered to a strictly confidential murmur so the sound would not travel back toward the building entrance. He stated plainly that the fresh glass of red wine placed on my table just moments ago contained a lethal dose of heavy sedatives. The dosage was specifically calculated to render an adult unconscious within a matter of minutes. I stared at the man in complete disbelief, demanding to know how he could confidently make such a terrifying accusation against my own family members. Pierce admitted he did not possess the entire blueprint of their scheme tonight, but he had planted himself near their table long enough to observe their subtle interactions. He explained he watched Seth slip a small vial to the bartender earlier, compensating the worker heavily to look the other way. More importantly, Pierce repeated the exact words he overheard Valerie whispering to Seth while my father was distracted by a phone notification. Valerie had leaned in closely, instructing Seth to ensure everything ends at Curve 7. Hearing the specific mention of Curve 7 sent a violent shockwave through my entire nervous system, rooting my feet firmly to the gravel ground. Curve 7 held a notorious reputation locally as the most treacherous stretch of the mountain pass winding through Napa Valley. It was an infamous location where the concrete guardrails were currently crumbling, leaving a sheer drop plunging hundreds of feet down into a rocky ravine below. The sinister logic of their coordinated plan assembled itself instantly in my mind, without requiring any further explanation from the investigator standing in front of me. They intended to wait for the sedative to take full effect, incapacitating me completely at the dinner table. Seth would then volunteer to drive me home to secure my safety, carefully placing my limp body into the driver's seat of my own sport utility vehicle once they reached the mountains. He planned to jam a heavy object against the gas pedal, shift the gears, and force the car over the edge of the cliff to stage a tragic driving incident. If I had taken even a single sip of that contaminated wine, I would have woken up in a free fall with absolutely no way to survive the impact. This horrifying realization unlocked a locked door in my memory that I had desperately tried to keep firmly shut for the past 3 months. Clayton lost his life on a strikingly similar winding road when his brakes inexplicably failed on his way back from a late business meeting. The local authorities ruled his passing a tragic mechanical failure, closing the investigation rather quickly because they found no obvious physical evidence of foul play at the crash scene. Standing there breathing the freezing night air, I felt a sickening wave of nausea wash over my stomach as the scattered puzzle pieces clicked together perfectly. My husband had been an exceptionally careful driver who meticulously maintained every single vehicle we owned, keeping detailed records of every inspection. The sudden brake failure never made sense to me initially, but overwhelming grief had clouded my judgment, forcing me to accept the official police report without asking any further questions. Now, looking at the serious expression on the private investigator standing before me, a massive question mark loomed over the darkest day of my existence. I began to seriously question whether the fatal incident taking Clayton away from me was truly a random mechanical tragedy. If Valerie alongside Seth possessed the audacity to orchestrate this elaborate setup tonight to eliminate me, they were entirely capable of tampering with a vehicle 3 months ago to secure their first victory. Pierce's vehicle turned away from the main avenue to stop directly in front of a small rental office hidden securely behind rows of harvested grapevines. Walking through the front door into the dimly lit workspace, I immediately voiced the sickening legal conclusion assembling itself in my mind regarding their ultimate goal. I stated firmly that if I suffered a fatal accident tonight, the designated beneficiary for Clayton's massive life insurance policy, alongside his irrevocable trust, would automatically default to Walter. Because my father completely deferred all family financial management decisions to his manipulative wife, Valerie would instantly gain absolute administrative control over the entire fortune. She would then effortlessly siphon those millions directly into her son's personal bank accounts without raising any suspicion from the strict estate lawyers managing the inheritance. Pierce did not offer any verbal confirmation before booting up a laptop resting on a scratched wooden desk positioned in the center of the room. He rotated the glowing screen toward me to display multiple financial spreadsheets he had recently acquired through legitimate investigative databases targeting my stepbrother. The detailed documents revealed a staggering truth about my stepbrother's reckless lifestyle that my family had successfully kept hidden from me for several years. Seth currently owed exactly $3 million to a violent underground sports betting syndicate operating just outside the regional county lines. Pierce opened a secondary window revealing several intercepted digital communications proving these ruthless creditors were aggressively demanding immediate payment while threatening severe physical consequences against him. The escalating timeline indicated Seth had absolutely no way to generate that enormous amount of capital through any legitimate employment opportunities available to him. Reaching into a thick manila folder resting beside the keyboard, the private investigator extracted a glossy surveillance photograph to place it gently over the financial statements. The grainy image showed Seth standing in a poorly lit alleyway, handing a heavily stuffed envelope to a man I recognized instantly from my neighborhood. The recipient was Brody, a notoriously corrupt mechanic operating a local auto repair shop, known throughout the valley for engaging in highly questionable automotive transactions. Pierce instructed me to look closely at the digital timestamp printed clearly on the bottom right corner of the physical photograph lying on the desk. The bold numbers confirmed this secretive cash exchange occurred exactly 2 days before Clayton experienced total brake failure on the treacherous mountain pass, resulting in his death. Staring at the undeniable visual proof connecting my stepbrother to a shady mechanic, I demanded to know why a private investigator spent months tracking Seth so closely. Pierce lowered his gaze to the wooden desk while his jaw tightened visibly before he began to explain the true motivations driving his relentless surveillance operation. He revealed his intense dedication stemmed from a deeply personal tragedy occurring exactly 2 years ago involving his younger sister named Chloe, who fell victim to Seth. Seth had ruthlessly manipulated Chloe into liquidating her entire retirement savings account, totaling $250,000 before inviting her on a remote weekend hiking trip. Chloe never returned from that isolated excursion because local authorities quickly determined she accidentally slipped off a steep mountain trail without conducting a thorough homicide investigation. Pierce spent every single day since that tragedy gathering enough concrete evidence to prove Seth deliberately orchestrated her fatal fall to steal her life savings to pay his debts. Listening to the tragic fate of another innocent woman who trusted my stepbrother, the final curtain of denial completely vanished from my logical mind forever. The massive $3 million gambling debt provided a desperate financial motive, while the illicit cash meeting with Brody offered the undeniable execution method to achieve their goal. Connecting these irrefutable facts together permanently eliminated any remaining possibility of a random mechanical malfunction occurring on that dark road 3 months ago. Clayton did not die because his vehicle suddenly broke down on a dangerous curve during his routine evening commute home from the city. My husband was brutally murdered to clear a path for Valerie, alongside Seth, to ultimately steal the massive fortune he left behind in the trust fund. The pale morning light filtered through the dust-covered window frame, shining directly onto the financial files spread wide open across the desk. I immediately grabbed my cellular phone from my leather purse to dial the federal authorities to report a coordinated murder. Pierce quickly reached across the wooden surface to press his hand firmly over my device before the call could connect. He meticulously explained the harsh realities of the American legal system regarding criminal prosecutions based entirely on circumstantial evidence. The surveillance photographs capturing a secretive meeting combined with massive underground gambling debts did not equate to a definitive murder conviction in any court of law. Pierce warned that prosecuting a complex homicide case required an ironclad chain of evidence to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Law enforcement officials required concrete proof directly linking Seth to the physical-mechanical tampering of Clayton's vehicle before a judge would ever sign an arrest warrant. Going to the authorities prematurely with only financial motives would simply alert my family to the ongoing investigation, while giving them ample time to destroy any remaining physical evidence. Experienced defense attorneys would easily dismiss the photographs as a simple transaction for routine automotive repairs, completely dismantling our entire case before it even reached a jury. I slammed my phone down onto the desk, demanding to know exactly how we were supposed to secure a murder conviction without involving the police right now. Pierce stated flatly that we needed a recorded confession directly from the perpetrators detailing their exact methods of execution. Refusing to let the people who murdered my husband escape justice, I decided to offer myself as the ultimate bait to force their hand. I picked up my phone again to dial the primary attorney managing the irrevocable trust established by Clayton before his passing. When the lawyer answered the call, I requested the immediate preparation of a formal legal document titled as a draft agreement for asset transfer. I instructed the legal team to structure the paperwork to appear as though I was willingly transferring complete management control over a multi-million-dollar commercial property directly to Seth. I specifically ordered the lawyer to leave the final notary's signature block completely blank to render the entire contract legally unenforceable. Presenting this unexecuted draft would successfully trigger my stepbrother's immense greed without actually transferring a single cent of my husband's hard-earned fortune into his possession. The meticulously drafted pages contained complex legal jargon designed specifically to overwhelm an untrained reader with promises of immediate financial authority. The attorney expressed severe reservations regarding this highly unusual request during our brief conversation, questioning my sudden desire to surrender prime real estate to a family member. I completely ignored his professional warnings, commanding him to dispatch the requested paperwork to my secure email address within the next hour. Once the digital file arrived, I utilized a small wireless printer in the corner of the office to produce a crisp physical copy of the counterfeit surrender document. While I organized the printed legal pages into a professional leather binder, Pierce initiated a secure phone call to a senior detective he trusted implicitly at the Napa County Sheriff's Office. He outlined the specific parameters of our undercover operation to the listening officer, securing their full tactical cooperation for a coordinated sting operation. The senior detective confirmed his team would remain completely silent on the radio channels until they heard the predetermined distress signal broadcasted from my location. The detective agreed to position several undercover units in unmarked vehicles situated at strategic blind spots surrounding the perimeter of my father's vast estate. After finalizing the law enforcement logistics, Pierce retrieved a small black case from his duffel bag resting on the floorboard. He extracted a microscopic audio recording device, equipped with real-time wireless transmission capabilities, designed to link directly to the police surveillance receivers. He carefully pinned the tiny transmitter behind the folded collar of my coat, ensuring the thick fabric completely concealed the electronic hardware from any visual inspection. We spent the next 30 minutes conducting audio checks to verify the microphone could clearly pick up normal conversational tones from several feet away. Pierce established a specific safe word that would instantly authorize the tactical teams to breach the residence if the situation escalated into physical violence. I memorized the exact sequence of events required to keep Seth talking long enough to incriminate himself on the federal wiretap without triggering his suspicion. 2 days later, the heavy iron gates of Walter's sprawling estate slowly swung open with a familiar dry screech echoing across the quiet valley. I navigated my vehicle up the elongated gravel driveway before parking directly in front of the massive double doors leading into the main residence. Stepping into the expansive living room, I found my father waiting alongside his wife to offer a highly theatrical display of parental concern. Walter immediately approached to wrap his arms around my shoulders, delivering a thoroughly rehearsed speech regarding his deep desire to support me during this transitional period. He insisted that family members must lean heavily upon each other whenever tragedy strikes unexpectedly. We sat together on the luxurious leather sofas while exchanging superficial pleasantries for exactly 5 minutes before the landline telephone inevitably interrupted our forced conversation. The incoming call originated from the primary tax attorney, managing the complex financial details surrounding the irrevocable trust Clayton established before his sudden passing. Walter apologized profusely while rising from his seat, explaining he needed to retreat upstairs to his private study to handle these pressing legal matters in complete silence. He promised to return quickly, leaving me entirely alone in the living room with the 2 individuals who had actively conspired to orchestrate my murder just 2 days prior. Valerie leaned forward to push a steaming porcelain teacup across the glass surface of the coffee table toward my side. She offered a tight smile, suggesting the warm herbal tea would help calm my visibly frayed nerves. I completely ignored the offered beverage, reaching directly into my leather tote bag, instead to retrieve the thick manila envelope containing the counterfeit legal paperwork. I tossed the heavy binder onto the center of the glass table, letting the crisp pages slide out slightly to reveal the bold heading denoting a draft agreement. Putting on the carefully rehearsed performance of an entirely exhausted widow, I sighed heavily while leaning back against the sofa cushions to deliver my fabricated proposition. I stated plainly that attempting to manage Clayton's vast commercial real estate empire alone had drained every ounce of my remaining physical energy over the past 3 months. I declared my formal intention to permanently surrender the total administrative control of a highly profitable commercial shopping center directly over to Seth effective immediately. I framed this massive financial concession as a desperate attempt to purchase lasting peace for our fractured family during an incredibly difficult season of mourning. I explained that removing myself from the daily corporate operations would finally allow me to focus entirely on my personal healing process without dealing with endless tenant disputes. I assured them both that the primary estate lawyers had already prepared the initial transfer documents awaiting final execution. Hearing the specific mention of a highly profitable commercial shopping center, a predatory gleam instantly illuminated Seth's eyes as he leaned abruptly toward the coffee table. He snatched the heavy binder from the glass surface with trembling hands, greedily scanning the complex legal jargon detailing the massive incoming revenue streams. His usual facade of bored indifference completely evaporated, replaced by an uncontrollable hunger as his eyes darted rapidly across the paragraphs outlining his new executive powers. He flipped frantically through the thick stack of papers to locate the specific clauses, verifying the total monetary value of the commercial assets being transferred into his name. Valerie visibly struggled to maintain her perfectly composed matriarchal demeanor while watching her son clutch the fabricated document holding the key to their immediate financial salvation. The rigid tension previously anchoring her posture dissolved completely, allowing her shoulders to drop as a sickeningly sweet smile stretched across her meticulously painted lips. Her tone shifted from passive aggression into a nauseatingly gentle cadence as she continuously offered fake praises regarding my incredibly mature decision to share the immense wealth. She repeatedly commended my profound understanding of family loyalty, insisting that Clayton would have been exceptionally proud to witness me prioritizing my own mental health above corporate greed. She continued spinning her web of manipulative flattery, claiming Seth possessed the exact business acumen necessary to expand the commercial portfolio, while giving me the quiet life I truly deserved. Seth did not bother to participate in his mother's theatrical performance, remaining completely fixated on calculating the enormous monthly profits printed clearly on the second page of the counterfeit contract. The crisp rustling sound of turning pages echoed clearly throughout the quiet atmosphere settling over the expansive living room as Seth examined the paperwork. I observed my stepbrother entirely consumed by the fabricated financial figures before shifting my posture on the luxurious leather sofa to initiate the next crucial phase of my psychological trap. I arranged my facial expression to project mild confusion while pretending to recall a minor inconvenience regarding my personal vehicle to steer the conversation toward their hidden secrets. I looked directly toward the glass coffee table before casually asking Seth whether he still maintained regular contact with that notorious local mechanic named Brody. I smoothly integrated a fabricated detail claiming my sport utility vehicle started making strange metallic noises recently during my daily commutes across the valley to justify bringing up the mechanic's name. I deliberately added another layer to the verbal bait by mentioning how Clayton used to complain constantly about his luxury sedan experiencing severe mechanical issues immediately after visiting that specific repair shop for routine maintenance. Seth kept his eyes firmly glued to the lucrative revenue projections printed across the counterfeit draft agreement without bothering to look up to acknowledge my physical presence in the room. He let out a highly dismissive smirk while running his index finger down the column detailing the massive monthly income generated by the commercial shopping center listed in the documents. He arrogantly stated that Brody possessed the unique ability to fix absolutely any mechanical problem provided the financial compensation was generous enough to secure his absolute discretion. He then callously suggested my late husband simply lacked basic driving skills to navigate those dangerous mountain roads, cruelly advising me to accept reality instead of blaming a highly skilled professional mechanic for a tragic driver error. He turned another thick page of the legal document while loudly muttering that people who cannot handle high-performance vehicles deserve whatever unfortunate fate awaits them on the asphalt. His complete lack of empathy combined with his overwhelming greed blinded him entirely to the obvious trap closing tightly around him with every single word leaving his mouth. Recognizing her arrogant son had carelessly revealed far too much information to a supposedly naive widow, Valerie immediately intervened to regain control over the dangerous narrative unfolding rapidly before her eyes. She stiffened her posture slightly while narrowing her eyes, projecting a remarkably cold tone masked beneath a thin layer of false maternal concern, designed specifically to intimidate me into immediate silence. She subtly warned me that certain stubborn individuals often brought devastating consequences upon themselves whenever they desperately tried clinging to valuable assets that never truly belonged to them in the first place. She reached across the glass table to pat my hand patronizingly, instructing me to stop overthinking tragic past events so I could focus entirely on moving forward with this incredibly generous property transfer without creating unnecessary complications. She emphasized that leaving the past firmly behind us was the absolute only logical way to ensure my continued physical safety, alongside my future mental well-being as a vulnerable widow living entirely alone. Refusing to let them steer the conversation away from their recent criminal activities, I forcefully pulled my hand away from her unwanted grasp to press my offensive strategy forward without any hesitation. I stared directly into her calculating eyes while asking if moving forward required me to completely ignore exactly how she deliberately switched my wine glass during the birthday celebration 2 nights ago. Valerie immediately feigned absolute shock regarding the direct accusation, raising her voice slightly to vehemently deny having any knowledge regarding my specific beverage preferences during that particular dinner party. Her desperate attempt at maintaining plausible deniability was instantly shattered by her own son's immense irritation at being constantly interrupted from reviewing his lucrative business contract regarding the commercial property. Seth finally snapped his head up from the documents, aggressively telling me his mother merely instructed the server to bring a much better vintage of red wine to our table because the previous bottle tasted incredibly cheap. He aggressively demanded to know why I was obsessively nitpicking irrelevant details from a stupid dinner party when we urgently needed to finalize a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction right this very second. Every single word of their indirect verbal confirmation flowed directly into the microscopic audio transmitter secured safely beneath my collar, providing the listening law enforcement authorities with the exact evidence required to secure a federal arrest warrant. Seth's index finger abruptly halted at the bottom edge of the final page, precisely where the official notary seal was required. His eyes narrowed aggressively to focus on the faint watermark displaying the specific words, indicating an unexecuted draft diagonally across the signature block. He frantically flipped the thick document over multiple times to inspect the blank spaces meant for the authorized legal stamps confirming a legitimate transfer of commercial assets. The intoxicating illusion of impending immense wealth instantly shattered inside his calculating mind upon realizing the entire real estate contract possessed absolutely zero legal authority. He recognized immediately that I had deliberately constructed this elaborate financial charade to manipulate his greed while offering him a completely worthless stack of printed paper. His breathing became incredibly heavy, while his knuckles turned completely white from gripping the leather binder so tightly that the internal metal rings snapped open loudly. A sudden surge of uncontrollable rage consumed my stepbrother completely as he violently kicked the heavy glass coffee table resting directly between us. The fragile surface flipped entirely upside down before crashing onto the hardwood floor to shatter into thousands of dangerous transparent shards, scattering across the expensive rugs. Before I could even attempt to stand up from the leather sofa to retreat toward the hallway, Seth lunged forward across the debris to grab the front collar of my blouse. He violently slammed my upper back against the upholstery while retrieving a sharp metallic object from his pocket to press directly against the sensitive skin of my exposed neck. He screamed furiously into my face, demanding I immediately dial the estate attorney on my cellular phone to authorize a direct wire transfer funneling the exact amount of money into his offshore accounts. I maintained direct eye contact with my attacker, refusing to show any signs of fear, while firmly denying his ridiculous demands to contact my legal representation for a financial transaction. Valerie jumped away from the flying glass fragments while shrieking in absolute horror at the sudden escalation of physical violence occurring inside her pristine living room. She desperately commanded her son to drop the improvised weapon immediately before he completely ruined their carefully constructed plans to inherit my massive fortune, covertly. She frantically reminded him that leaving obvious physical evidence of a violent struggle would completely destroy their alibi regarding a tragic accidental death, similar to my late husband. Seth completely ignored his panicking mother while pushing the sharp metal edge closer to my skin, swearing to end my life right there if I refused to comply with his aggressive orders. Knowing the microscopic transmitter secured underneath my collar was actively broadcasting every single threat to the waiting authorities, I confidently shouted the designated safe word at the maximum volume my lungs could possibly produce. Less than 2 seconds after the specific emergency phrase left my lips, an explosive crash demolished the heavy wooden patio doors leading toward the backyard gardens. Multiple armed sheriff deputies alongside a specialized tactical unit breached the perimeter simultaneously, while heavily armored boots trampled over the shattered glass covering the wooden floorboards. The commanding officers immediately leveled their tactical weapons directly at my stepbrother, while screaming deafening orders demanding he drop the weapon to surrender himself to law enforcement. Startled by the overwhelming police presence swarming the residence from multiple entry points, Seth momentarily loosened his aggressive physical grip on my clothing. That tiny hesitation provided the highly trained tactical officers the exact opportunity needed to physically tackle him to the ground, while forcefully ripping the dangerous object from his trembling hands. 2 heavily armored deputies pressed their combined body weight firmly against his struggling frame to secure his wrists tightly in metal handcuffs behind his back, while reciting his Miranda rights loudly. Valerie collapsed entirely onto her knees beside the ruined coffee table, shrieking hysterically, while a female deputy firmly grabbed her arms to place her under immediate arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. Pierce walked through the broken patio entrance right behind the tactical team, pointing directly at Valerie to ensure the arresting officers secured the primary conspirator without any unnecessary delays. Hearing the overwhelming commotion echoing throughout the ground floor, Walter rushed down the grand staircase in a state of absolute panic to witness the shocking destruction of his entire household. He stood frozen on the bottom step, staring in complete disbelief as the authorities aggressively hauled his screaming wife alongside his handcuffed son toward the waiting patrol vehicles parked outside. 6 months later, a remarkably solemn atmosphere heavily enveloped the marble corridors winding through the expansive Napa County Courthouse. The highly publicized criminal trial concluded decisively after Brody officially accepted a comprehensive plea deal formally offered by the lead district attorney. The disgraced mechanic took the witness stand to provide crucial eyewitness testimony detailing the specific vehicle tampering scheme, successfully negotiating a significantly reduced prison sentence in exchange for his full cooperation. Standing before the presiding judge wearing heavy metal shackles, Seth showed absolutely zero remorse while receiving a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without any possibility of future parole. Valerie stood rigidly beside her lead defense attorney, while the stern judge officially sentenced her to 30 years inside a maximum security federal penitentiary facility. The relentless prosecution team successfully secured multiple felony convictions against my stepmother, specifically targeting her direct involvement regarding conspiracy to commit murder, alongside aggressive charges involving wire fraud, plus insurance fraud. The judge publicly condemned their actions as a sickening display of unchecked human greed before ordering the bailiffs to escort the convicted criminals back to their holding cells. Walking briskly toward the main exit after the grueling legal proceedings officially concluded, I found Walter deliberately blocking my designated path near the heavy wooden courtroom doors. My father immediately stepped forward to grasp both of my forearms, shedding heavy tears, while desperately attempting to salvage his completely ruined reputation in the public eye. He babbled almost incoherently about remaining entirely oblivious to the horrific criminal conspiracy secretly orchestrated right beneath his own roof over the past several years. He shamelessly positioned himself as another innocent victim who suffered immense betrayal at the hands of a manipulative wife who successfully blinded him with false affection. He begged profusely for my immediate forgiveness, pleading for an opportunity to rebuild our fractured family relationship since we currently only had each other left in this world. He insisted he would have immediately contacted the local authorities himself if he harbored even the slightest suspicion regarding their terrifying financial motives targeting my inheritance. He claimed his demanding corporate career kept him entirely distracted from realizing the true extent of their dangerous gambling addictions. I maintained absolute silence while listening to his pathetic excuses before pulling my arms aggressively out from his uncomfortably tight grasp. I stared directly into his tearful eyes with a chillingly detached expression, refusing to offer even a single ounce of the familial sympathy he so desperately craved today. I stated clearly that his willful ignorance over the decades directly empowered his second family to execute their terrifying plans without facing any internal resistance whatsoever. He possessed numerous opportunities to question their lavish spending habits or investigate the sudden influx of suspicious wealth consistently entering their joint bank accounts. I told him plainly that choosing complete cowardice simply to preserve his comfortable daily lifestyle constituted an unforgivable moral crime against his own flesh. He actively chose to look away whenever they intentionally isolated me during my childhood, effectively prioritizing his personal peace over my fundamental physical safety. I forcefully reminded him that true parenting required active protection rather than passive observation, while predators slowly circled their chosen prey inside the family home. He allowed his own home to become a hunting ground, because turning a blind eye was significantly easier than confronting the monsters sleeping down the hall. Walter visibly crumbled under the crushing weight of my verbal confrontation, dropping his trembling hands loosely to his sides as his quiet sobbing echoed down the empty hallway. I stepped firmly past his defeated posture without offering any further explanations or customary farewells to soften the brutal reality of our permanent estrangement. Pushing my body through the heavy glass entrance doors, I stepped directly out into the remarkably bright California sunlight washing warmly over the concrete courthouse steps. I walked deliberately toward my parked vehicle waiting in the visitor lot, unlocking the doors before sliding comfortably into the leather driver's seat to start the powerful engine. I pressed the accelerator firmly to merge onto the main highway, permanently leaving the picturesque hills of Napa Valley far behind me without ever checking the rearview mirror. I drove steadily toward the distant horizon to officially begin building an entirely new existence, completely free from the toxic shadows haunting my past. The overwhelming relief of securing permanent justice for Clayton finally allowed me to breathe properly for the very first time since his tragic passing.